For decades, Japan has been consumed by perpetual war. Half of the country is ablaze, while the other half drowns in blood. As warlords clash and their samurai scheme to overthrow them, one has risen above the rest. Oda Nobunaga has carved a brutal and bloody path across Japan, sacking towns, wiping out clans and burning temples. All across Japan, soldiers, townfolk and warlords alike fear this self-proclaimed Demon King and the dark future that awaits them. Today we play as one of Oda's victims, a clan that in real history met its end at the Demon King's hands. Will we hold a tide against Nobunaga, or be crushed under his heel like so many before? If we manage to beat him, can we unify Japan without becoming just as demonic? Also, if everybody watching this subscribes, I'd hit my goal in no time, and it really would mean a lot to me, thank you. And before we get started, we're giving away 4 copies of the upcoming flavor pack over on Discord, so if you do want to win one, the link will be in the description. Starting in 1578 AD as just a tiny count, and Nobunaga already having 11,000 troops and in 3 wars to further expand, we would have a lot to do to catch up. So wasting no time, I married off myself, my son and courtiers to improve our council, and it didn't take very long for some unhappy vassal to attempt to overthrow my liege. Although I refused to help as I had much bigger goals and couldn't risk having my land revoked just yet. But oh wait no, apparently Owanomari found this deeply offensive and decided to siege my castle and, well, failed miserably, as our archers were able to destroy their front lines before they had any chance to enter. After failing to get a hook on my liege, I decided to take the loss and increase my levy obligations in favour of being on the council, becoming his Kasai, giving me a huge +2 gold per month, as well as some extra taxes and cheaper construction, as building a prosperous realm would be essential if we had any chance of later defeating the Demon King. I successfully managed to fabricate a claim on our neighbour in 1583, and just 2 years later, after saving up a small war chest, declared war, which turns out would be our saviour, as our allies refused to help out, but they had their allies' full support, returning after their initial loss with almost 1,000 troops, so the mercenaries we bought would allow us to scrape a win and take the highly developed county of Fukushi, a great first victory. This sparked a sense of ambition in Mitsu, and he learned how to claim his liege's throne, which surely would be useful in the future. All of this had me pretty distracted, as I got the shock of finding out I have a 4-year-old son, so everybody meet Naomitsu, I guess? The 1st of August, 1583 was an important milestone, the very first building that would hopefully continue and be the backbone of a never thought possible rebellion, as Mitsu thought it was very important to build, as this would catapult him to the top in no time. Oh wait, no, of course, death. Turns out our new wife was useless with a pretty low chance of giving us any more children, so what did we do? Sent her straight to the streets, jump on Tinder and swipe, and surprise, surprise, every genius is either a lunatic or simply not interested in men. So welcome Fukuchi, just be very careful around her. She is very likely to come to your courtroom looking for a lost head, and then deciding she will just take yours instead, but she has nice eyes, I guess, right? And karma is a thing in CK3 apparently. I get stuck with a lunatic and now my ex-wife is pregnant. How ironic. But none of that matters anyway, as eventually we got a genius son and let the eugenics program commence. Eventually, with Fukushi now fully under control, we moved our capital there and continued to build up the town, as it already had 52 development, making it the perfect base to expand further from. But sadly, Oda Nobunaga died before we had any chance to meet, but his son, another fierce leader, would now continue his blood rule over Japan, and that's exactly what he did. Within just a few years, he marched his way up to our liege, leaving him no choice but to surrender. This dramatically changed our plans. We must destroy the Oda Empire from the inside, but this meant we had to speed up. So we used our claim on Himi in what should have been an easy to win war, but it was not. We got destroyed in battle and sent running home, left with no choice than to do what no true leader should ever do: beg. We begged our liege for help. Luckily, he took pity, leaving us in his debt, but with an extra 500 troops to defeat the Jimbo's army, ultimately giving us our 3rd county, but was it worth our honour? After spending some time upgrading his holdings, Morimitsu desired the island of Sadu, but with the only entrance being by sea, it would not be possible unless he had a much larger army, so he continued investing into his land and building a strong army, full of elite Teppo Ashigaru, who wielded strong rifles, easily able to pierce strong armour. Morimitsu wanted not just victory, but death upon his foes. But before he had time to launch his attack, he became infirm and slowly deteriorated until dying at 64. Menumitsu would now be the one to carry on his legacy. Quickly getting a casus belli for Haiku, but his liege's crown authority was too high to declare war against fellow vassals. Luckily, there was already a liberty war in progress, which would eventually be successful, meaning Menumitsu would now have the chance to prove himself in battle, and doing exactly that by winning his first war and becoming the first duke of his family. But still very far away from the current overlords of the Oda emperors, who are still constantly expanding, making things more difficult every day. As soon, all of Japan will be controlled by them. Not long after, his heir, Sukemitsu, came of age, getting Midas touched. Paired with genius, it seemed his family's future was in safe hands. At this point, I just wanted to start to rank up in the world. But I needed at least one more county, so I spent the next 5 years doing more building and training a better army as we stepped into the era of war. Starting with the county of Emizu, whose unprepared peasant-filled armies held no ground, quickly surrendering, allowing Munemitsu to become a Jujoi-ji, the first of many ranks of the imperial court, then moving down south to take over Nishi Tonami, this time facing a much larger army, but still, the war was very short-lived, and taking the island of Sado, fulfilling his father's legacy. And it was starting to seem his family's plans of building a profitable nation was starting to pay off. Gaining over 30 gold each month and an almost max level capital, it was one of the most profitable regions in Japan. And using this money to outspend his neighbours on his army, allowing him to expand at an explosive rate. But seemingly, his family was cursed. He would suffer the same fate as his father, becoming a prisoner inside his very own body, unable to rule his land, dying at 65, passing the throne to Sukemitsu, who seemingly held a dark secret. He practiced witchcraft, believing only the supernatural could do the impossible of overthrowing the bloody rule of the Oda's family. Set on converting his family to his ways, this could truly go very badly, but only time will tell. And without much thought, continued his father's rampage, taking Naka with ease, further giving him the belief that witchcraft was the way forward, and hoping to found a witch coven, and by 1662 he was already halfway there. Continuing his wrath to the east, having an army 10 times the size of his opponent, it seemed his family's once hopeful idea of taking over Japan with little bloodshed started to slip, and Sukemitsu started doing exactly what his ancestors fought against, slaughtering his enemies and showing no mercy and leaving none to tell the tale. Then, just 5 years later, enough family members got together and founded a witch coven, a dangerous secret nobody could find out about. And then either by sheer luck or their dark practices have been answered, his liege granted him his son, with the county of Noto as a vassal. And it would quickly get revoked, giving him access to the duchy building, investing in tax offices to get the 10% increase on all holding taxes. For some reason, his liege held no ill will and soon granted his son his very own title. This witch thing really seemed to be working a little too well. But witch or not, death still gets everyone in the end. Tisunamitsu was fairly well trained in the art of war, and used this experience with the power left by his father to fabricate a claim on his liege's throne. Built up his men-at-arms, even spending 500 gold to buy his fellow vassals' support in getting the claim. And if all things went well, it would almost be time to become a direct vassal of the emperor. But first, a more pressing matter. It seems his realm's people had some differences from the Western Hokurikus, and it was time to build a new, stronger identity. The Fukashi culture was created, a true identity his people could identify with. And not long after his claim was successful, he now had a legal claim to the kingdom of Hokuriku. And after a few more years of building up his army with heavy cavalry and elite samurai, it was time to demand his rightful land. And it turns out, Norimori admitted defeat without raising a single troop. The Yusa family now had true royalty and direct connections to the Demon King's very own descendants. Also, the Emperor's daughter seemed interested, so you just know we had to hit that. Look, it's the ultimate Chad move. Then, after spending the past 10 years building up my new realm, it seemed a cult attempted to intimidate me. Clearly not realizing I recently made a much scarier cult that took over most of Europe, the simple word Bane sent them running. But then, the inevitable happened. We had the grandson of the Emperor, which of course, all of Japan needed to know about. All of this was happening while continuing his expansion. Now onto Gujo, and then getting a claim on all of Mino. This would be a massive addition to his kingdom, but first established swords for hire for the Fukashi culture, as military power would be more important than anything at this point, as money was almost unlimited. Further, falling into the darkness he was supposed to fight, it was time to add Mino camo to his collection, ultimately being another scarily one-sided war. Having over 15,000 troops in his personal army, there were very few people who could successfully defend such an attack. Although the wars kept getting bigger in size, challenging Tokai for Mikawa, quickly raising two armies, one to hunt and slay the enemies, and the other to take control over the contested region. Things went pretty well. And just 2 years later, his enemies were left with barely any troops and a destroyed capital that would take many years to rebuild. Tsunami now held a very powerful position, a complete split down the center of Japan, allowing his men to track everything that passes through, making it almost impossible for other kingdoms to plan between themselves without him catching on. His liege, either stupid or hoping to stay on good terms, sold the title of Mino and granted his vassals to the ever-growing region of Hokuriku. With the unfortunate passing of Tsunamitsu, Motomitsu was able to take the decision to strengthen our bloodline, as he was Herculean, genius, and beautiful. This gave some great bonuses, allowing us to keep good congenital traits a part of our bloodline forever. His first war eventually came when his nephew successfully got a claim on all of Shinano, wasting no time pushing the claim, quickly sieging a line of terror through their land and ambushing their armies who came to reclaim the lost sections, leaving them with little to no defense against the inevitable. The cult built up the courage to return, this time better prepared, sneaking up to Motomitsu in the night and attacking him, leaving him permanently disfigured before disappearing into the darkness of night. Unfazed by this, went to war for Musashi, getting in possibly one of the most brutal battles ever, taking on an army of over 15,000 men and leaving them with only 13 survivors. This crippled his enemy's defense, leaving them completely powerless after losing their entire army in one short battle, then giving his cousin this new land to rule. The loss of his heir was difficult enough, but shortly after, his very own vassal executed his son, sending Motomitsu into a frenzy, imprisoning Kasugayama, stripping him of any titles, then torturing him before leaving him to rot in the dungeons. And it didn't take long before he met his early demise. More powerful than ever before, he attempted to claim his liege's throne and take the entire empire for himself, but somehow he was found out pretty quickly, imprisoned and eventually dying, passing the pressure of taking the empire to Mitsumoto, who made fast progress getting a legitimate claim. And after starting a claimant faction, he spent a few years further upgrading his army and buying every single mercenary available. And on the 13th of May, 1762, sent his demands to the Oda overlords, who laughed off the demand and raised their men to fight off their most powerful opponent yet. And we're infirm. Starting the war losing 2 battles in a row is a terrible look. It seemed as if all his family's efforts were for nothing, but he carried on fighting, giving his troops a chance to rebuild and for his allies to arrive, marching together into the fight that would decide everything, and it turns out fate was on his side. Finally winning a battle and beginning to siege as an ambush returns, catching a smaller unit on their own, but reinforcements arrive quickly enough to defeat their armies once again, then moving on to siege the enemy capital, sealing Japan's fate. The Usa Empire now ruled Japan as the new shogunate. But it split. Everyone went free as the Demon King's influence was no more. The Usa dynasty achieved exactly what they wanted: to defeat the dominating rule of their warmongering overlords. Everyone was now free to do their own thing, but not every story has a happy ending. Mitsumoto became exactly what his family set out to destroy, quickly using his newfound power and fame to take over all the neighbouring kingdoms to the south and north, in bloody, drawn-out wars, razing homes and slaughtering the men who dared to fight back. By 1782, the majority of Japan was now under Usa control, and once again, another small family decided enough was enough, and started to build their very own power, through marriages, building up their cities and taking the land of those around them, in hopes of setting Japan free. Will they finally be the ones to stay true to their word, or will they become just as evil as those who stood in their shoes before them? Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, do consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really means a lot to me. And of course, another big thank you to Dagda, who gave me the idea for this playthrough and even wrote the amazing intro. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this one where I spin a wheel that decides everything that I do. But I wanted to end the video with a massive thank you to Intermia1, Harold Volmer, Victor Voss Anderson, and Random Icelander.